Welcome to today's SEAside webinar, See in Your Search, Visualization Techniques for Exploring PubMed Search Results. My name is Carrie Burkett, and I'm the Data and Evaluation Coordinator for the National Network of Libraries of Medicine, Southeastern Atlantic region. Before we begin with today's guest speaker, there are just a few administrative details I'm going to go over with you. As you are sharing, communicating, or asking questions via the chat box, please be sure to send to all attendees so that myself, our presenter, and your colleagues can see your questions. For this session, we're going to take questions all at the end, but if anything pressing comes up during the presentation, please feel free to share it, and I will make sure that the question gets relayed to Ed. If you need closed captioning for today's webinar, the link is posted in the chat box. I'll go ahead and drop it there again. Today, our guest speaker is Edwin Spur. He is the Clinical Information Librarian at the Augusta University, University of Georgia Medical Partnership. Since developing the interactive tool PubVenn in 2015, Ed has explored the use of data visualization techniques in several different contexts, and I'm really excited to hear more about this project. So let's all welcome Ed. Ed, I'm going to pass the presentation privileges over to you.
Great, thanks, Carrie.
And we should be all set. Thanks.
Fantastic. If you don't hear anything, please let me know. But as Carrie said, my name is Edwin Spur, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the theories and practice of visualizing PubMed results, as well as looking at a couple of tools that I've developed over the past couple of years. So like all good instruction sessions, I'm going to begin with a sample query. So we're going to start off by thinking about what it would mean to find items that are about the subject of type 2 diabetes. Now, if we go into PubMed Labs, the brand new version of PubMed that'll probably be going live soon as the official PubMed in a couple of months, we see that if we translate our query into medical librarianese, we end up with diabetes mellitus, type 2. And you see that this is a fairly streamlined looking page, and I have, it looks like about 3 results that I can see the titles of. So out of 140,000, I'm looking at 3. Now we could say, well, that's you know, you might actually want to take a look at a couple more results in this list. So we could say, well, we'll zoom out and we'll look at the first 10. But we still don't necessarily see that much information about what's going on with our search. We're seeing those first 10 results, but it's kind of hard to extrapolate from those first 10 results exactly what's going on with the whole 140,000 odd ones. And even if we were to zoom out even further, we could zoom out to where we were theoretically seeing a couple of hundred results at a time. I would argue that's still not necessarily a great representation of what's going on with that search as a whole. Now, it's important to think about that when we're using a list in this case, basically a list is just a tool. A list is just kind of a mental model of what's going on, when in reality what we have is a whole bunch of individual articles. So we have kind of an undifferentiated pile of stuff. So again, a list is a model, a list is an interface, and a list does some things really well. So obviously lists are simple. Everybody's familiar with them. So, you know, I'm talking about lists in the context of PubMed, but of course this is nothing special about PubMed. This is the case for every single database we use as librarians. It's also the case for any kind of general purpose search engine searching. So they're simple. I mean, you know, everybody sort of knows how lists work as an interface, and they're also really good for providing access. So if I click on that third item from that first screen, I'm going to get straight to that article. But I would argue also that there are issues with lists only being ordered on one axis. So certainly if we're looking at that PubMed example, you know, we could say best match, we could say by publication date, we could say how recent it is in the database, but we're still only looking at one axis at a time. And lists also don't do anything in terms of showing us the context of our search. So again, we're seeing those first few items, but we're not seeing much information about those items. So this entire presentation is predicated on the idea that maybe we could do better, at least for some kinds of applications. So when we think about this mental model of what's going on behind of a list, many times this is the kind of thing we're thinking about where we're taking a look at this great big haystack full of articles and we're trying to find the needles in that haystack. Now theoretically we're going through the entire haystack and going straw, 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 needle, straw, 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 needle, and so forth and so on. But I mean honestly that's never the way it works. I mean even unless you're doing a systematic review, nobody goes all the way to the very end of the results set. Certainly no clinician or medical student goes all the way through the results set. They maybe go through the first 10 pages. So maybe they're looking at the first 30 or 40 or 50, and they don't go beyond that number, even if they're a relatively diligent searcher. So we're not even getting all of the needles. We're just getting a couple of the needles that happen to be falling towards the beginning of that list. So another way of thinking about that is instead of saying, well, we're going to iterate through every single item on that list, is say, well, is there some way of taking that big old pile of articles and divide them up into pieces? So we could think instead of this undifferentiated mass with a couple of needles therein, we could say, well, we're going to take this whole mass of things and we're going to put all the articles about diseases in one pile, or all the articles about organisms in one pile, or all the articles about psychiatry in one pile. Under the theory of that, if something we want that's mostly about diseases, it might be in there. And again, you'll recognize this as part of the sort of mental framework that we usually teach when we do advanced bibliographic instruction sessions about PubMed. So if we're to do that for this example, we'd say, well, okay, so we have 39 articles about diseases, we have 25 articles about psychiatry, we have 70 articles about organisms, 61 articles about diagnostic techniques. And again, because these numbers are fairly small, they make a lot of intuitive sense to us. We can easily see which one's bigger and which one's not. But anybody who's ever done this in practice knows that if you look at an order of magnitude above this, it's kind of hard to keep straight mentally, that you see 21,802, how much bigger really is that 10,000, and 25? So once numbers get bigger and once numbers get more numerous, it's really hard for us mentally to keep track of what's bigger and what's smaller. So that's why many times looking at a visualization technique, like in this case a very simple bar graph, makes a lot of sense, because not only does this work really well in terms of keeping straight which one's bigger, which one's smaller, how much of a difference that is for small numbers, but it works equally well for large numbers. So when we're thinking about building a visualization in the abstract, we start off by defining something countable. Now, the example we used just a second ago was subject headings, and subject headings are countable. Everything that's indexed in Medline has medical subject headings attached to it. Now, I didn't start off by saying I want to find the good articles versus the bad articles, because that's not something predefined in the database. It's not something easily countable, unless I were to iterate through every single item individually. So once we define something countable, we count it, and then finally we display that number as a visual summary. And again, that's the interesting, useful part of this. We have a visual summary that gives us some sense of the gestalt of what's going on with our search before we even dig in to individual items. So just as lists have pluses and minuses, I would argue that visualizations have pluses and minuses as well. And again, the big thing that I think visualizations have in terms of being an advantage over a list is that we can actually take and summarize a complex data set. And we'd actually do that over multiple axes as well, depending on the kind of visualization we're using. And as we'll talk about in a minute, when we look at interactive visualizations, I would say that's another win, because then we could take a look interactively and see how changes in a search strategy can affect those visualizations. So we have a nice feedback loop going. Of course, the big disadvantage is that, unlike a list, it's not necessarily straightforward. So sometimes, depending on the visualization, there may be a little bit of a learning curve in terms of an end user. So when we're thinking about specifically visualizing bibliographic searches as opposed to visualizing something else, two really important things to keep in mind. Number one, items that come back in a search. So each individual item, all those items have attributes. So for instance, in the examples we're going to take a look at in a few minutes, we're going to look at subjects and dates. Now attributes are important because again, they can be predefined and they can be aggregated together. So you can get great big piles of things that you can stack up underneath and represent as a bar graph. But also searches make sets. Again, I think a lot of us have the experience of teaching a BI session and we go through that process of building searches piece by piece in the advanced search box, looking at how those numbers change when we make changes to our search strategy. So each one of those things, each one of those numbers of results is a different set. And particularly when we're using that model of iterating through a complex search strategy and changing a complex search strategy bit by bit, those sets are going to be closely related to one another. So when we make a set more narrow, the members of that set are probably going to live underneath the set that we started off with. So here's an example of a visualization that probably all of us are familiar with. So this is the version from PubMed Labs, but those of us that use PubMed on a regular basis will recognize this because there's a slightly different looking version in PubMed Classic. But this is what a graph of the articles published about diabetes mellitus, type 2 looks like. So we see this graph actually starts in 51 because it's a subject heading that dates back to 1951, ends in the current year. And, it's obvious that diabetes mellitus is a pressing clinical concern. It's certainly something that's become more prominent over the past several years. So it makes a lot of sense that this graph curves upward in a dramatic way. But when we take a look at lots of searches, we see basically the same pattern. So diabetes mellitus goes up almost straight up, but so does breast cancer, so does surgery, so does malaria, heart diseases, and medical education. So basically, we're not really seeing anything in particular about how important a topic is, how dramatic the increase in publication about a topic is, because at the end of the day, really what we're seeing is this overlay of data where PubMed itself has gotten a lot bigger. So when PubMed itself gets a lot bigger, it makes sense that basically anything we're going to find in PubMed, if we define that as a set of results that comes back from a search, we're going to see a lot more of those as well. So this brings us to a really important point that is kind of a jumping off place for some of the things that come next, is that when we're talking about visualizing data, usually it's not just that we're finding a way to graph data points, but many times it's kind of important to start off by thinking about what is a useful baseline. So this is a quote, I think this comes from a talk that he gave at Microsoft, Edward Tufte, but he's said various similar things in his works. So Edward Tufte is kind of an OG visualization person. He's written a lot of books, goes on tours around the country. But basically this is a fairly straightforward point, but an important one to make, because being able to contextualize what a graph is doing, being able to contextualize what data is doing is really important. So instead of talking about visualizations in general, we're going to talk specifically about visualizing PubMed results. And so the way to do this, the way to construct these visualizations, falls on the same basic pattern for most of the examples we're going to look at next. We start off by sending a search to PubMed using a programmatic interface, API for short, that's the acronym most people use. We're going to retrieve the count for that search. So we're going to send a search, we're going to get back a number of results. We're going to compare that count to a baseline, some sort of relevant baseline. And finally, we're going to graph what that result or what that difference looks like. Just a little bit about APIs, if you haven't heard the term before. Basically, an API is a way of talking to a server in a very specific way. So certainly any time that you request a web page using a web browser, that's a kind of request, it's a kind of talking to the server. You're getting back a whole lot of information, so not just the items, but also where those items live in the page. Maybe there's something else that goes on the left-hand side, maybe there's something on the right-hand side. Web pages get very complex these days. So basically an API is just a really stripped down way of talking to a server, in this case a server that lives virtually over at NCBI, and getting back, in this case, the number of results from a search in PubMed. Talking about e-utilities, which is the sort of brand name of the API that NCBI uses, is beyond the scope of this talk, but I would like to direct you to this extensive set of documentation they have now at dataguide.nlm.nih.gov. It basically talks about how to use this beast. So this is an API to all the NCBI databases. I mean, we care mostly about PubMed, at least for the purpose of this talk, but you can use GenBank and other databases as well. It's well maintained by the NLM, so it stays up. When you call on it, it talks to you back. And it's a very simple syntax for making calls. So this example that I used the slide before is pretty much a real example. You can do things just that simply. And because it's simple, you can actually implement it in lots of different environments. So the examples we're going to be looking at in just a moment are primarily done in JavaScript, but you could just easily talk to this API using Python, using R, using the command line. There's a bunch of examples that they have up in the documentation using the command line from a Linux box. So it's very simple to use. Now, in terms of converting these numbers into visualizations, so converting these numbers into charts and graphs, the examples I'm going to show here in a second are primarily built in JavaScript. Primarily I did it that way just because I wanted to do something that I could build cheaply and not have to pay for server clock cycles. So in this case, most of these things actually run in the web browser of the person calling. The visualizations themselves are done in Google Charts for the most part. PubMed, which we're going to take a look at in a second, is done using d3.js. I don't want to belabor the technical points, but I do want to point out that these are all free tools. So this isn't necessarily something that you need to pay a really expensive site license to do. You can sort of poke at some of these examples. So there's lots of examples on the Google Charts page, on the D3 page. A lot of the examples they use are sort of static data examples, which are great, but you can also use these with data calls as well, as we're going to be doing in just a second, looking at interactive tools. But this is something that there's a lot of room to explore in terms of using tools. But again, these tools are freely available, which is really important for those of us that don't have extensive development budgets. So we're going to take a look at this first example of grouping items by subject. So just like we started off when we were looking at our original sort of dummy example, we're going to do this live in PubMed. Well, obviously not live because I'm not insane, but I'm going to show you screenshots of a live application where you could look at these live later on. So if we're to go back to our beginning search of diabetes mellitus, type 2, we'll see one of the first things that comes up is this nice thing about mouse models of diabetes type 2 and using those mouse models to drive drug discovery. Now, we're familiar with what this looks like in PubMed Labs, but the thing that I do want to point out is this very important thing down below underneath mesh terms. So this actually has medical subject headings because it's been indexed for Medline. And as you can imagine, if we were to click on this diabetes mellitus, type 2 medical subject heading, we see our mesh display where we see the title, the scope note, subheadings. We'll come back to subheadings in just a minute. But we also see our nice tree display where we see that diabetes mellitus, type 2 is a fairly specific subject heading. So lipotrophic diabetes mellitus lives underneath it, but there's many more broader subject headings that live above it in the tree. So we go diabetes mellitus, glucose metabolism disorders, metabolic diseases, all the way up to the very broad category of diseases. Now, if we're to follow up any of the medical subject headings in the mesh tree, we see that they begin with these very, very broad mesh categories, going all the way from analytical, diagnostic, and therapeutic techniques, all the way down to technology, food, and beverages. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that when we're searching in PubMed, as y'all likely know, when we search a very, very broad subject heading, by default, unless we tell it differently, we get all the things that live underneath. So the default is to explode that search. So when I search for diseases, I'm not only getting things indexed under that extraordinarily broad diseases category, I'm also getting each and every one of the individual diseases that live underneath, including diabetes type 2. And so if we think about using an API and searching programmatically we could say, well, I'm going to send the search of diabetes mellitus, type 2 to PubMed. But not only am I going to search that search, but I'm also going to search that search in conjunction. I'm going to and that search together with all these broad categories and use that as a way of sort of slicing and dicing. So I can not only see how many results I get back for diabetes mellitus, type 2. I'm going to go ahead and declare that as a mesh heading in this example. But I can also see all the different things underneath each and every one of those individual categories. And that looks a little something like this. So we see the percentage of results in each category for diabetes mellitus, type 2. We see that diagnostic stuff goes pretty far all the way over. Not surprisingly, diseases, it comes back 100% because, again, when I search, I'm searching for a specific disease lives underneath diseases, so it's not surprising that all of my articles are going to be that. But again, the important thing is I'm visually comparing that with all of Medline. So not only can I see that there's a whole bunch of articles that are indexed with the subject heading diseases, or the broad category diseases, but also that's considerably more diseases than exists in PubMed as a whole. So I can tell you that the things that come back from this search, even without looking at any individual item just yet, are primarily about diseases, and they're more about diseases than PubMed as a whole. Even a little bit more about geographical locations, which is kind of surprising, but less about technology and food and beverages. Now, we could compare those side by side, or we could just say, just show me the difference. Again, this is another visualization built in Google Charts where we're just looking at the difference from baseline. So again, we see that strong peak in terms of diseases. We see a pretty big peak in terms of persons. Chemicals and drugs, oddly enough, actually is a little bit less prominent than Medline as a whole. So that actually is kind of interesting to me. And that's an example of how we might learn something that's not completely known to us at the beginning by using a visualization tool like this. Now, if we build a system to where we can send a search to PubMed and slice it and dice it by anding it together with these more specific searches and then graphing those differences, well, by the time we've done all that, we can just as easily take multiple searches and compare those multiple searches to one another. So in this case, we're going to start off with our diabetes mellitus search. We're also going to fold in a search for the fairly broad medical subject heading of heart diseases. And so we can actually compare those searches together, actually compare the differences from baseline for those two searches. So again, without looking at any individual items, I could tell you with a fair degree of certainty that heart diseases has more to do with anatomy as an aggregate pile of stuff than diabetes mellitus does. But also not surprisingly, chemicals and drugs is much more prominent for diabetes mellitus than it is for heart diseases, and so on and so forth. So it's really easy to combine our search with broad medical subject heading categories and slice and dice a great big pile of results that way. It's pretty much just as easy to look at medical subject headings as well. So just as we could and our search together with a bunch of individual broad medical subject heading categories, we can actually and it together with a bunch of different medical subheadings and see what we can see doing that. So in this case, using that same search for diabetes mellitus, type 2, unsurprisingly, analysis is a subheading that's really, really prominent in these results. Physiology is another subheading that's really, really prominent in these results. Methods, for some reason, is less prominent. And again, comparing that to heart diseases tells us something really important about the aggregate qualities of these items as they come back. So analysis is really important for diabetes mellitus, so is physiology. But kind of surprisingly to me, diagnosis is proportionally more important when we're looking at heart diseases. And again, you can go on, so in this case, in this example, I'm using two fairly different searches, but you could imagine using two fairly similar searches and using this tool as a window and how two iterations or two different search strategies for the same concept might differ from one another in terms of the results that come back. So that's looking at subjects. But we can also think about using this concept of programmatically running searches against PubMed, visualizing the results, to think about how the parts of a search are connected. So again, typically when we're doing very complex, complicated searches, we have multiple pieces ANDed together, sometimes nested in parentheses. And it can sometimes be kind of difficult to figure out, well, what's this piece doing versus that piece? So this is the kind of thing that you might have shown in a bibliographic instruction class yourself at some point. This is, of course, a Boolean diagram. So we can see that intersection of X and Y. We can see, second, that union of X and Y. And finally, we can see those bits of, in this case, X, well, the things that aren't in X. So we're trying to find the things that aren't in that set. So our ands, our ors, and our nots. This is the way that we sometimes visually try to teach this concept when we're doing BI classes. But a couple of years ago, I had the idea that wouldn't it be interesting if we could actually do this for real-life results? And so this is a little application called pubvenn.appspot.com, or PubVenn, where we actually take a look and we can do complicated searches and see what these sets look like in relation to one another. So not surprisingly, PubMed has a lot more to tell us about death than it does about love, but there's a little bit of intersection between those two things. That's our Romeo and Juliet intersection, if you will. But perhaps a more clinically relevant example is our earlier combination of heart diseases and diabetes mellitus type 2. In this case, we can see that there are obviously some articles that talk about both those concepts together. But this gives us some sense visually of what that intersection looks like, instead of just adding the concepts together and trying to read the numbers off of the screen. It also really reinforces the idea that there's a whole bunch more stuff about heart diseases than there is about this fairly narrow slice of diabetes. And we can actually add on more and more things, almost ad infinitum. Now again, if you get much past 3 different pieces of the search, this chart can get kind of busy and complicated, and it does kind of break down once you get past 4 or 5, because it's really hard to represent the relationships between 4 or 5 different things in a 2D representation like this. But it is kind of interesting, and you can certainly see there's a whole bunch of stuff about mosquitoes, about an equal amount of stuff about the Caribbean, and dengue, actually, surprisingly. There's a whole bunch of stuff about that, too. There's obviously an intersection there, but maybe not as much of an intersection as one might think. So that's using Boolean diagrams to show the relationships between different sets or different parts of a search. But is there some way that we can go back to maybe that example at the very beginning in terms of looking at trends for a search over time and maybe do things in a little bit more of a straightforward way so we can actually see what's going on with a search over time? So this is PubMed by year. This application doesn't actually use the API. It uses a little bit of leisure domain in terms of getting those results back in a timely fashion. But it basically uses those results by year that, that NCBI puts in that chart, but it compares them to the baseline of results. And again, that's something I would argue that's a little bit more useful. So it's not just, you know, the number of articles about diabetes mellitus type 2 is a bigger number in 2005 than it is in 1962. But what is that number? How is that number in proportion to the total number of articles in PubMed? I think that tells us a little bit more about what's going on over time. And this is what that number looks like, charted as a proportion of citations in PubMed as a whole. And actually we can see that that first iteration, that first chart, really didn't lie to us at all. Diabetes mellitus common type 2 actually has become a lot more prominent proportionally than it was when that subject heading first started being used. Now, because we can actually send that search programmatically to PubMed and graph the results, we can use that same trick we used a couple of minutes ago when we were looking at subjects and show the difference between 2 different searches. So in this case, we can see that, yeah, diabetes mellitus type 2 actually is a little bit more specific than diabetes because that number is smaller. We can see how much smaller it is on the chart, but we can see that that change over time is actually really, really similar between those 2 different ways of search, those 2 different sets.
Hey, Ed, can I interrupt for just a second?
Yes.
We had 2 kind of similar questions come in. Nancy asked, do we need to learn JavaScript to create these data vises, or is this plug and plot? And then Jane asked earlier when you were talking about JavaScript and I think Google Charts, if they would need to use those tools to be able to see the visualizations.
No, it's a really good question. No, I just wanted to say how these were built, just to encourage people that wanted to sort of explore some of these concepts themselves if they can, because I'm not really a developer by trade. I'm somebody that taught myself some fairly ugly looking JavaScript. But no, all of these things are applications that live on the web. So if you want to play with Mesh Category Graph, you go to this URL down here at the bottom of the slide. So espur.github.io/meshcatgraph, an incredibly creative name for this application. But no, if you wanted to play with this visualization, you go to that URL down at the bottom of the slide. For the same token, if you wanted to look at the subheadings, you go to that URL down at the bottom of the slide. Thanks for the question. It's actually something really important to point out. But no, these are applications that you use and you run your own searches against to see what those searches look like. So obviously you could use those examples that I provided, or you could find more interesting searches to run yourself. And PubVen lives at this URL, pubven.appspot.com. Oh, thanks for interrupting. That's a really important point to get across. So yes, I'm showing screenshots of running searches against these applications, but these applications themselves are live applications that you could use yourself. And so all you need to use them is a web browser and a search that you want to run in PubMed of some kind. Thanks. Oh, yes, and importantly as well, this is what PubMed by year looks like as an application, but this is how you get to it from this URL down at the bottom. So again, diabetes increases, diabetes mellitus increases basically on the same slope, though less of it, because it is a more specific search. So you get back a smaller result set, so that makes sense. And going back to that initial example, we look at all those searches mushed together in the same graph. I don't really understand where medical education is coming from. I don't understand why there's so much medical education stuff. I really have to investigate that one of these days. It's getting to the point where it's at about the same level heart diseases. But we can see that, you know, breast cancer is really important. We can see that heart diseases is really important. Though interesting, heart diseases has stayed fairly stable over time. Hasn't really gone up that much since 1963, actually gone down a little bit as a proportion of the database as a whole. So even as the total number of results for heart disease has gone up, it's gotten slightly less important. But that surgery really dwarfs them all, which is not terribly surprising because when you run that search surgery, we're picking up surgery as a subject heading, we're picking it up as a title and abstract keyword. So it makes sense there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff about surgery. And indeed, it does come to a bit over a tenth of the database as a whole. So those are individual applications, which again you can use yourself with the searches that you want to use in a web browser. But I do think that there's some potential utility in terms of thinking about putting some of these individual applications, some of these individual ways of viewing result sets together into a single interface. And so this is an application called Search Workbench. Again, this URL, searchworkbench.info. And so we're going to start off using our same example search. And we'll see when we search for diabetes mellitus, type 2 as a medical subject heading, we get back something that looks like this. One thing I do want to point out that I think is kind of interesting about this interface, I'm never quite sure how obvious some of these things are, is that we do make a point of showing the mapping in this case. So obviously there's not really any mapping going on underneath the hood in terms of automatic term mapping because we explicitly delineated as a medical subject heading term. So our search was translated from diabetes mellitus, type 2 BESH terms to diabetes mellitus, type 2 BESH terms. So for that, that's not necessarily that interesting. But one thing I do want to point out is this proportion graph. So we don't have a Venn diagram in this case because there's only one part to our search, but we do have our proportion tracking because this is a good bit of stuff. I mean, almost 130,000 results in this set. So there's plenty to graph year upon year. Now we could be a little more specific. We could edit this search. So just like you might teach this search in a BI class, or just like you might do this search in real life, if you're trying to find drugs, you might make this a little more specific. So instead of just diabetes mellitus, type 2, you'll do diabetes mellitus, type 2 drug therapy, trying to drill in and just find those medications to treat this. And again, just as if we were looking at PubMed Classic, we can see very easily the difference in those two result sets. So we can see that we have almost 130,000 results for that broad medical subject heading, but then if we limit it to that subheading of drug therapy, then we get back considerably less stuff. So I know that 31,434 is a smaller number than 125,109, but again, my brain works, to where it's sometimes numbers get much past 200 or 300, everything gets kind of fuzzy. I don't know if your brain works the same way. So it's a little easier to see this in a visual format. So if we come over here to the right-hand side on this application, which again you can find at searchworkbench.info, you can see this panel for comparing searches to one another. So we only have 2 searches so far, so that's all we can compare. So we can do that, and we can see on the same page a comparison in terms of proportion over year of the entire database, as well as this Venn diagram. So basically, we're seeing the same information in 2 different ways. We're seeing that diabetes mellitus / drug therapy is a smaller number, and all of those results live within this larger set of diabetes mellitus, type 2. That's pretty much the mental model that I might have if I was thinking about how the search would work. It's interesting to me that the diabetes mellitus, the curve going up, seems to be a little bit more dramatic than if I just limit it to drug therapy. So that's a potentially interesting piece of information. And again, that's something that we can see by using this application to combine these 2 visualizations together. Now, you might ask, what's the big deal? Because that's basically something we could have easily predicted. I mean, obviously, there's going to be less stuff if we limit it to a subheading as opposed to looking at the entire medical subject heading. Maybe it tells us a little bit that the drug therapy subheading is going up more slowly, but still that number's smaller. That number lives underneath it in the curve. So maybe this isn't necessarily that earth-shaking. But I would argue that using these kinds of techniques can tell us things that we didn't necessarily predict. Actually can tell us things that are kind of important if we're thinking about how to refine a search in such a way that we're not losing things that we might want. So in this case, if I'm doing a fairly broad search for things about autism, I might start off with the broad search autism, and sure enough, get back a little bit over 48,000 different results. Now, being a good medical librarian, I might say, well, I want to go through and I want to make this search a little more specific. So if I look at that mapping display, again down here, so my translation, I'll see that there's a bunch of keywords, but there's also a medical subject heading. It seems to make a lot of sense. So I might say that, hey, I want to just see things for that medical subject heading instead of everything it turns up under the keyword of autism. So I could go through, I could edit this search, I could just get my autistic disorder medical subject heading part, and I get back 19,000 different results. So that is a much smaller number than I started off with. So I might say, hey, that actually appears to be working the way I might expect it to in terms of my mental model of how the search works. And if I look at the Venn diagram, I see that all of those results live within the broader search of autism, so that's working exactly the way I would expect it to. But when I look at proportion by year, I see something that might trouble me. So I haven't dug in to see exactly what's going on in terms of the difference between these 2 different searches. But given the sort of sociological valence of autism as a concept, given the amount of research that's likely being done on autism, that first line for autism itself doesn't surprise me at all. It makes sense that's going up at a fairly dramatic clip in terms of proportion of the results as a whole. But when I see that that medical subject heading of autistic disorder going down from 2010 as a proportional part of the database as a whole, that might actually give me pause in terms of thinking about whether or not that's the most appropriate search to use, particularly if I'm looking for recent things about autism. Because I have a strong suspicion that there are useful things, interesting things, things that I might want as a searcher in the real world that I'm somehow missing for some reason, because that initial guess that autistic disorder as the best medical subject heading really hasn't panned out. Similarly, if you're thinking about using the clinical queries that are built into PubMed, so these are fairly broad hedges that were originally developed at McMaster University by a group working up there. And basically the idea is that we could drill into concepts like therapy or prognosis or diagnosis or systematic reviews or medical genetics, but we're just going to talk about the clinical study categories here for a moment. We could somehow use these hedges to get at articles that are about these clinical concerns. So if we're to go back to our diabetes mellitus type 2, if we're to click on edit, we can see there's actually a little button sort of hidden here underneath this screenshot called add a hedge. And we can go ahead and add one of these hedges. So this is just adding that, and this is actually sending this as a command. So we're not trying to reproduce the hedge. We're actually just telling PubMed, hey, search for diagnosis, or search for prognosis, rather, in this case. So we search that and search Workbench. We can see that, yes, that number is a lot smaller. So we go from 130,000 down to almost 25,000. So that prognosis broad filter, that broad hedge prognosis where we're trying to get a whole bunch of stuff about prognosis specifically seems to be working as planned. So it made our result set smaller. We can actually see the relative proportions of prognosis, so everything coming back for prognosis/broad filter versus everything coming back for diabetes mellitus as a medical subject heading. If we were to repeat that for the narrow filter of the prognosis/narrow filter search for that same subject heading, we see something that might trouble us. Because again, if we look at the explanation of what these hedges do, the way narrow is supposed to work is it's supposed to give us things about this topic that are much more focused in relative terms. And broad is supposed to give us things about this topic that are much less focused in relative terms. So we're going to get back more stuff for broad, less stuff for narrow. But honestly, the way that that hedge is described, I would expect anything from narrow to live underneath that broad subject, that broad filter. I wouldn't expect to not see things using broad that I would see for narrow. But this is actually something that's pretty disturbingly common, particularly when you're looking at prognosis. So for therapy, therapy is the one well-behaved hedge to where nothing's ever missed. But for all of the others, including in particular prognosis, you do actually miss, in some cases, a fair amount of stuff when you're looking at the broad heading alone. So there's things that you're going to miss if you're just searching broad that you would have seen if you searched narrow instead, which logically to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you want to explore this in a little bit more detail, this is the paper that I put together exploring this sort of issue. Just came out in the Journal of the Medical Library Association. That's the URL for it right down there. So all of these applications, the sort of, again, somewhat poorly formatted JavaScript for all these applications, you can find at my GitHub repository, so github.com/espur. And I actually ended up going through the slides a little more quickly than I intended to. So I will entertain questions. So all of these applications you can find at this one URL, visualizing PubMed, so espur.com/ github.io/visualizingpubmed. Again, these are actual applications that you can run your own searches against in terms of trying to see what those searches look like, see how those searches work. In the case of Search Workbench, you can actually compare searches to one another. And again, I think this is a really potentially valuable approach in terms of thinking about, well, if we're teaching people to iterate through the searching process and refine their search strategies, and indeed if we're doing that ourselves, which in many cases we are, then it's really potentially interesting in terms of taking a look at what those resulting sets of results actually look like. So how do those sets compare? Not just that set's smaller than the first set or that set's bigger than the first set, but how do those sets actually compare with each other? Does one completely live within the other? Does it poke out a little bit? Do the curves in terms of changes over time make sense? Is there one variation where we're getting a lot more recent stuff proportionally than we are the other? So these are all things that I think are potentially useful in terms of looking at, because again, it's really important to get that search dialed in as best we can at the outset, because outside of the context of doing a systematic review, nobody's going to look at 3,200 results. It just doesn't happen. So the trick is trying to get that search dialed in as well as you can at the outset, and that way, hopefully, by the time you're looking at individual items, the things that you actually want will be in that first tranche of 100 to 200 different results. So again, those are the applications at Search Workbench, but also there's other individual tools as well as a couple of other things at Visualizing PubMed. Those are my email addresses, work and personal, my Twitter, and my blog, which does not get updated very often, but when I do update it, it's usually about this stuff. So if you want to keep up with this stuff, you can check that out. Great, and so I'll take questions from Kiri now. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. So we have a question from Laura. She asked, do you see these concepts as being mainly useful for librarians and researchers, or have you found utility in teaching users as well?
I've not personally had the chance to introduce these tools much to end users. It's been a while since I've done a BI class for non-librarians. In my current position, I do a lot more sort of clinical work than I do teaching classes. I want to use PubVenn when I talk about Boolean. I think some people do. So I do think, and so Search Workbench, it's been a while since I've added a feature to Search Workbench. That is my version of sort of a front end to PubMed that I think does some things a little better in terms of manipulating sets of results. So certainly the ideal end user for Search Workbench as an application would be like a grad student working on an elaborate project where she's going through multiple searches and really trying to dial it in to get the kinds of stuff she's looking for. But yeah, so these do kind of straddle that line between interesting, fun toys and actually useful tools. I do think Search Workbench is getting at the notion of what a useful tool using these concepts would look like.
Thanks. So there was another question from Kimberly, and she commented on the JNLA Mind the Gap article that just came out and asked, have you asked PubMed or the folks who developed clinical queries filters why there is not more overlap between the narrow results and the broad results?
So basically, the way those hedges work right now, they were developed by the Haynes. I'm not looking at it right now, so I'm worried I'm mispronouncing his last name. But the group that they mastered that originally put those together. And basically the way they did it is they did it in sort of they looked at the math in terms of saying, well, so we have a set of known good articles. We're going to see how well this hedge performs in retrieving those known good articles. And we're going to say, and actually they have three cases, a balanced case, a broad case that's done towards getting lots of stuff in a narrow case that's done and getting less stuff but having it more focused. So they just looked at retrieval. So they weren't really looking at the end case in terms of whether all the items of one set lived underneath the other items. I've talked a little bit to the head of that group. That's not something that they're really working on right now, so it's sort of a weird thing to where they've sort of done that work and they've left it aside, and I don't know if somebody else is going to look at those hedges in the future. You know, I have a feeling we're probably at a point where it's just all going to be machine learning in another 3 or 5 years, so nobody's ever going to look at those sort of manual hedges again. In the interim, if you wanted to make sure that you got all the stuff, you could just take the expedient of ORing those two hedges together. So certainly if I was going to use that prognosis hedge, you know, in production, I would be tempted to say, well, you know, if I want to get back as much stuff as I possibly could, I'm going to say prognosis / broad, but I'm going to go ahead and OR that together with prognosis / narrow, and that way I'm going to get the union of those two sets, so I don't miss anything. But yeah, so I have talked to people a little bit. I haven't heard when those are going to change or if they're ever going to change. So yeah, so I'm curious about that as well.
Thanks. John asked, are all the URLs run by you? I guess the URLs that you shared for the tools. Or is there a third party involved that we might have to worry about those websites being dodgy?
So they should not be dodgy. So most of those applications live, those are basically static pages that live on GitHub. So the moving parts for a lot of those are the API that you call from the National Center for Biotechnology Information. So that's not going to be dodgy. That's going to be fine. GitHub is something that started off as more of a coder / hacker thing a few years ago. Now I think they're owned by Microsoft. So that's a pretty big outfit in terms of hosting code. So there's nothing to worry about there. The other pieces that aren't in GitHub live, right? And so for PubVen, just because of the way I did it, I might do it differently now, but PubVen, the way I did it back then, that lives on Google Pages, Google App Engine, but it's actually just driving static pages. And the other little sort of semi-API that I constructed myself to get the date tallies lives in Google App Engine. So, you know, as much as you can trust Google, which I think all of us pretty much are forced to trust Google these days in order to live our daily lives. So as dodgy as you think they are, that's how dodgy that piece is. But no, that's a really good question. But again, in terms of construction, all of these guys basically run in your browser for the most part. So these are done with JavaScript. So as long as you have a reasonably modern web browser, either on a desktop computer or a laptop or a modern smartphone, these things will work just fine. But no, these aren't things that you know, live on whatever the modern equivalent of MySpace is. So as long as GitHub and Google are good, we'll be good with these.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, you all have Ed's contact information and the places to find more about these projects if you're interested. I will send out the slides from today's presentation as well as a link to the recording of the webinar, which will be on YouTube. So that takes a couple of days. We have to pull together some different files and things on this end, but you'll all get that in an email, hopefully within the week. So Ed, I'm going to take back the presenter ball there.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Carrie, and thanks so much for everybody for spending a little bit of the afternoon with me today.
Sure. Okay, as I just mentioned, recording availability is on YouTube. For those of you who are interested, the next NNLM SEA webinar is about the nuances of open access and predatory publishing, and that is next Tuesday at the same time. And then I'm going to drop the link to the evaluation into the chat box. If you fill out the evaluation, you'll get a code sorry, I'm wrestling with the link here. You'll get the code to claim your MLACE. So thank you all again for attending today's webinar, and a huge thank you to Ed for your time and your insight. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good afternoon.